I'm John Woodward, and it's Wednesday, the 21st of February 2024. Welcome to the 7-Minute Briefing Podcast, your monthly roundup of news from the Middle East and North Africa, brought to you by Sat7. A year on from the two devastating earthquakes that hit Turkey and Syria, the repercussions are still being felt for many people who live in the two countries. Elsewhere, the new World Watch List highlights the dangers facing Christians in the Middle East and North Africa, and conflict in the Holy Land continues to deepen, bringing stronger calls from international church leaders for a ceasefire. Sat7's Turkish and Arabic channels recently screened new reports on the 6th of February anniversary of the two earthquakes that brought mass destruction to South Turkey and northwest Syria. The quakes claimed over 50,000 lives in Turkey and another 8,000 in Syria. Hatay province, home to Turkey's largest Christian community, was one of the worst hit. Its population of 1.7 million has shrunk to 250,000, as residents moved to stay with relatives or find shelter elsewhere. Rebuilding is underway, but the pace is slow and the task colossal. Although destruction was less widespread in Syria, many factors are preventing recovery. After 12 years of conflict, over 4 million people in the area needed humanitarian aid even before the quake struck. Most of the northwest remains under rebel control, and Syrian government corruption, international sanctions which hamper foreign aid, and a collapse in the value of the Syrian currency compound the problems. The Armenian Orthodox Bishop of Aleppo, Magar Ashkarian, told Aid to the Church in Need that the earthquake had increased Christian migration abroad. Nevertheless, he said Christian denominations have come closer, saying, "We live together in a very close relationship and try to help entirely without discrimination." Elsewhere in Turkey, an Islamic State group claimed terrorist attack on a church in Istanbul killed a friend of the country's papal vicar and injured a second worshipper. Two gunmen opened fire during a morning service at the Santa Maria Church in Syria district on the 28th of January. Authorities later captured the men and increased security at city churches. Sat7 viewers messaged its Turkish channel with words of condolence, but also expressed their resolve not to live in fear. "We Christians are everywhere," one wrote. "Our people will not be afraid." This latest attack in Turkey highlights the dangers facing Christians across the MENA. On the 17th of January, Open Doors released the 2024 World Watch List, an annual list of the 50 most difficult places in the world to be a Christian. 18 out of the 25 countries in which Sat7 works appear on the list. Article 18 also launched a report titled Faceless Victims in collaboration with Open Doors, Christian Solidarity Worldwide and Middle East Concern. The report highlights how Iranians' fundamental freedoms continue to be curtailed by state authorities. Moving to Algeria, which rose 4 places on the World Watch List, the authorities have closed 43 of the country's 47 Protestant churches, and church leaders have been threatened with prosecution. The closures are understandably having an impact on Algerian believers. Sat7 Arabic's programme Home Church from Algeria, which broadcasts church services for viewers to join at home, is one of the programmes helping isolated believers. You can find links to the World Watch List and Faceless Victims report in this episode's show notes, where you can also sign up to get the briefing long read and podcast delivered to your inbox every month. Back to the briefing now, and in the Holy Land, the war between Israel and Hamas has continued with further loss of life. Over the last 4 months, Israeli bombardments and ground operations against Hamas have forced most of the population of Gaza to move from area to area. 1.5 million are now sheltering in the southernmost city of Rafah, while others are in improvised tents in Al-Nawissa, a coastal shrubland area. The entry of food and medical supplies to Gaza has been severely restricted, prompting warnings of famine. Israeli allies, including the UK and US, are urging Israel not to mount a ground invasion of Rafah, since Gazans have nowhere left to go. Israeli citizens, meanwhile, have mounted large demonstrations to voice their dissatisfaction at the length of the war and its failure to return those Hamas captured. Despite strong mediation efforts by countries including Qatar and Egypt, no agreement on hostage releases or a ceasefire has been reached. The risk of conflict between Israeli forces and the powerful Hezbollah military and political group in Lebanon is also escalating. Cross-border exchanges of fire have reached more deeply into both countries, despite visits by European diplomats to Beirut aiming to reduce tensions. Senior church voices from around the world, including the Church of England's House of Bishops, have stepped up calls for an end to the violence in the Holy Land and urged for more concerted efforts to be made by both sides for peace. And finally to Sudan, where 10 months of fighting between the Sudan Armed Forces and Rapid Support Forces militia has left around 18 million people facing acute hunger, humanitarian agencies have warned. UNICEF said tens of thousands of children will die without additional support and access across conflict lines. Up 2 places to 10th in the World Watch list, progress made in Sudan towards religious freedom a few years earlier, which included abolishing the death penalty for apostasy, has now been undone. Some 165 churches in a nation with an estimated 2 million Christians have closed or been destroyed. Despite the troubles, Sat7 is hearing and broadcasting stories of resilience and faithfulness from viewers in Sudan. In times of pain and difficulty, I find strong support from the mighty hands of our Lord, said Alhem, a female Sat7 viewer from Sudan. She also said, at a time when everyone is abandoning us, our Lord is present. Thank you for listening to the 7-Minute Briefing podcast from Sat7. When we look at the Middle East and North Africa today, it can be hard to know how to pray. Yet these are the lands that fill the pages of our Bibles, where Jesus walked among us and the church itself was born. This Lent, join us on a journey of prayer through the Middle East and North Africa. For more information, visit sat7uk.org/40 days and order our 40 Days of Prayer resource today.